just to introduce myself briefly, my name is Donny Winter. I'm a local poet, and I'm going to be reading some poems for you from each of my collections. I have 3 collections. I'll be describing them a little bit, giving some details. But I do want to nerd out for a moment that I get to share the evening with my mentor and former professor, Robert Fanning, so I am really excited to be here with you. So this was my first collection, Carbon Footprint. It came out during the beginning time of the pandemic, you know, that horrible time where we didn't know what was happening in the universe. And the book kind of reflects that, just a little bit. So most of these poems have a lot to do with geology, nature, and I connect it to kind of like the LGBTQ plus experience growing up in rural Michigan, which, as you can imagine, was a fun time, so. Okay, so this first poem is titled Orogenesis, and it is essentially a word that means the tectonic act of the mountains being formed, essentially. The earth and I have forgotten how to rest. Sleep no longer satisfies as shut eyes divide the time between geologic periods. I taught Gaia how to laugh, again at my expense, when I told her that my Mesozoic era was my 20s. Mass extinctions and attempted cataclysms were well documented throughout that decade, all in fossilized diaries. Some days I envy the soil below as it exhales beyond my range of perception as it readies itself for the next tumultuous phase. After all, in every era, there's a lull of solace as our plates prepare to heave mountains toward the sun. Okay, so this poem is more of a mental health themed poem, just it's a content warning. Mostly because I think during the pandemic we were at home, we were just thinking about everything, constantly about everything happening in the world. And I think that had a way of us learning a lot more about ourselves too when we were just in the comforts of our own thoughts. So this poem is titled Letter from a Self-Deprecator, because I'm totally not one of those. Dear, incredibly patient person, thank you. I know I fall with cloudburst force, and I'm sorry the dam in my ribcage has cracks. I know I'm a lot, and never passed the safety inspections because I overreact. Some days I'm a confused chickadee. I can't sing blissful songs, and I peck at my own reflection, and I'm sorry for that too. Though I ruffle my feathers to seem larger than I am, as I always act so small, and gradually accept what I see as a foggy mirage wiped away, as a summer shower leaves ditches dredged, yet I seem to imprint a softness behind, a sadness as a quickened deluge that fades against a patched roof that thankfully looks normal, that doesn't drip, and is low maintenance, I swear. So keep the buckets in the basement, because I'm fine, sincerely. The ceiling isn't leaking. So the last poem that I'm going to read from my first book is a super gay poem. So bear with that. It's titled My Closet is a Reliquary, and I dedicated it to a mentor in the LGBTQ plus community who kind of helped me learn self-acceptance a long time ago. His name was Ace London. He was an actor and activist. And one time I went home to visit my parents, and I slept in my childhood bedroom, which was a super awkward experience because I hadn't been in there for like 5 years. It was a mess, let's just say, of just clutter, old things that I had kept. So this poem kind of reflects on the person I was then versus the person I am now. My closet is a reliquary. The closet door has fallen from its track and sits, leaned against the dented drywall like a discarded portcullis too weathered to keep me. Behind box-stacked skyscrapers, yellowed wallpaper peels, and the crayon mural still robs floral print of its optic illusion. Like a political graffiti with elementary verve, the shelves still dip under collections of unread religious texts, and the bloated plastic drawers refuse to budge from their cheap retail compartments as each paper-filled basin brims. The air is linen stale, and the glued constellations above still keep the room lit, while the tired July sun slips beneath the tree line, lengthening each shadow across the brown shag carpet. My parents still have brown shag carpet, which is horrible. These years later, I keep the closet door off its track because it's powerless, a prison-made museum, a memorialized womb left open since I left for college after a second birth. Now my closet has lost its echo, and each stored memory maps a misshapen journey. So, let these paper roadways return to nature, become overgrown, because this cluttered closet is a reliquary, a room for storage, unable to keep me. All right, so I'm a nerd, if that wasn't obvious at first. So, my second collection is called Feats of Alchemy, and it's largely themed around how we as human beings have to kind of adjust ourselves to different social situations, even when we don't always want to. It's kind of like a coping mechanism. So this poem collection is a little bit darker and a little bit gayer, dare I say it? So, okay. So, thank you. Okay, so this first poem is another home-themed poem. During the pandemic, obviously there was a lot of political unrest that was happening, and returning home to northern Michigan was a very surreal experience, kind of a terrifying experience sometimes. So this poem came from that. When I come home. I travel between the bends in pavement rivers and follow the sunset as it dips toward white pine tree lines whose tightened arms threaten to swallow the day. When I come home, a sullen beast crawls into my sternum and steers my eyes toward all things derelict. The rusted tractor overgrown in the field, unsure of its color, the fresh tree stumps left from a summer storm, the twisted deer carcass tossed along the roadside, and all the decaying houses left by families who haven't seen each other since the deaths of grandparents. When I come home, tattered Confederate flags hang on naked limbs just outside the somnolent town, framed by the sloped silhouettes of weathered hills, the same old mountains who've known history long before us. When I come home, the cats slink to their food bowls, no longer thrilled by the hunt, and my tired parents retire to their ends of the house while I, seeing these places through teenage eyes, walk trails with hope that memories will never die. All right, so let's do some queer ones, shall we? Okay. In this book, I decided for some reason to do a series of poems called Queer Confessions, and they basically talk a lot about LGBTQ plus experiences post coming out, which I don't think is a time that we really talk about a lot. We talk a lot about coming out, but once you get there, everything seems to be sunshine and rainbows, no pun intended. So this is Queer Confession number 5. The window is still damp from the last time I stood too close, waiting to watch you coast into the driveway. The airtight rooms in this house are catacombs without you here, while outside, the world keeps strength to spin in the hum of each passing car, in the hollow wind pressing through naked trees, in the grass as it struggles to keep its green nestled between the jagged snow continents, melting at the yard. These afternoons stretch into ages, and when you're gone, somehow I stave off the empty house from swallowing me whole and knowing that you're coming home to me. This is kind of a sassy poem, kind of a sassy one. I had a conversation with my friend about being a token gay. I don't know if you've ever heard of that term before. Basically, it's that gay best friend that everyone has that assumes that they're a best friend, and you'll know after I'm done reading this, hopefully, we'll see. Token gay. After years spent praying our gay aways, we sometimes find our best fit as marionettes, seemingly merry, elbow-locked as we fit in best with storefront mannequins, faceless, the bodies we critique almost as much as our own because our clay dried too soon. As we age, we anticipate each trend based on the conditional, so change the outfit because we're empowered puppets imbued with rewarded authority, knights in pop cultural armor, only to give fashion advice, interior design opinions, gardening recommendations, serve as a +1, pretend to be the boyfriend, ride the dotted line between Cupid and therapist for them, then finally lose our luster when our usefulness expires, or perhaps when we finally find happiness, or build our boundaries for the first time because we're token gays, fitting each season that passes, though we feel out of style on the inside. Oh, yes. All right, so this last book is my most recent collection. It's titled Casting Seeds. My maternal grandmother rest in peace, she's been gone for about 20 years now, but she was instrumental in kind of shaping my sense of self, so I wanted to dedicate an entire book to these very nostalgic memories that I have of her. So here are some poems from this. Okay. Not necessarily just memories of her either, but also memories of her house and the property that I literally grew up on, that I kind of connect with her all the time. So this first piece is titled When I Grew to Love Thunderstorms. And I wanted to write a poem about the moment I fell in love with thunderstorms, because I remember as a kid I used to be terrified of them, but then something happened where I went from being terrified to being obsessed, and literally laying outside in the grass being yelled at by my parents for being in a thunderstorm. So, right, still do that from time to time. When I grew to love thunderstorms, the air felt heavy as flashes spread in the west. Birdsong grew distant while they nestled in the trees to wait out the coming storm. Instead of hiding, I lingered in the doorway and felt the leaves breathe, sensed the atmosphere inhale before the break of rainfall. Downpours roared closer like a herd of wild horses. The nitrogen-rich Petrichor lifted from dust and reduced the sphere to rust. Did I mention that these are short poems in this book? No. There you go. All right, a darker poem now. There's some darker poems in this one too. So, this poem I wrote about being male and being shamed when it comes to crying all the time. So, this poem is titled On Being Ashamed to Cry, and just note there is some strong language in it. Okay. Number 1, elementary school. Boys don't cry, they'd say, as I hid behind the truck whose hitch I had hit as I pedaled my John Deere tractor faster than I could control. Middle school, number 2. Man up, they'd holler, as I was placed on display in the gym as the boys outran me, uncoordinated and discombobulated. Number 3, high school. "You're such a faggot," echoed through the locker room, as the boys stood still and laughed when I'd look away, timid without any clothes. Number 4, college. "You're too sensitive," ricocheted within these ribs on a failing date because my thoughts of romance weren't what real men wanted. Number 5, graduate school. "You're too much," they'd say, after I failed an exam and went home to cry into my broken futon behind safe studio apartment walls. Number 6, postgraduate. "You fight way too hard, Donny," they say, as I strain to hide lips that still quiver, eyes that still swell, cheeks that flush at the thought of them seeing. It's kind of an awkward one to clap to, but I totally understand. Okay. So the last piece that I'm going to read is it's kind of like a very sentimental poem. It's titled Grandmother Jack Pine. My grandma has this scraggly looking jack pine in front of her house still to this day, and it kind of just reminds me of her, so I wrote a poem about it. Why not, right? Grandmother Jack Pine. "You wave me hello as your jagged arms still dance against each sunset, weathered by last winter's snow, sagging with unopened cones. Even still I sit, a child sprawled beneath your shade on a fresh mown lawn, unfazed by the sharpened grass or gravel indentations. Sometimes I return to trace faces in the bark, to salvage lost cones, to watch disheveled hands shift against the passage of clouds. And when you wave goodbye, as you fade against the west, on the road behind, your unkept silhouette stands like a sentry against time.